In the 1950s, less than 5% of the domestic workforce required a state-mandated license to do their job. By the late 2010s, state oversight expanded to encompass approximately 22% of all American workers. State legislatures often justify this expansion through the public interest model of regulation. This theory posits that mandatory standards solve information asymmetry, protecting consumers from unqualified or negligent actors in the marketplace. The barbering sector provides a specific test case for this logic. Today, every state and the District of Columbia mandates individual licensure for barbers and cosmetologists, creating 51 distinct sets of rules for the same tactile services. While these boards exist to protect the public, an evaluation of health inspection data suggests a disconnect between high-hour training mandates and actual sanitary outcomes inside commercial shops. The data indicates that extreme educational barriers do not result in cleaner or safer environments. Instead, these requirements often result in significant student debt and localized workforce shortages. Historically, barbering was governed by a guild system where practitioners operated as barber surgeons. In colonial America, these individuals performed minor medical procedures like bloodletting and tooth extractions alongside standard hair and beard grooming. During the 19th century, the medical profession professionalized and legally restricted surgical duties to licensed physicians. This forced a structural separation, limiting barbers to non-medical cosmetic grooming. Despite this separation, state boards maintained a highly interventionist stance. In 1897, Minnesota passed the first barber licensing law specifically to combat infectious skin conditions like tinea psychosis or barber's itch. After the Second World War, the GI Bill fueled an expansion of vocational trade schools. State boards responded by increasing mandatory training hours, shifting the trade from an apprentice-based craft into a school-dominated academic pathway. Modern licensing requirements are an inheritance of these early sanitary laws and the post-war move toward formalization. These structures have persisted even as the actual surgical risks of the trade were removed over a century ago. This scatterplot maps the entry barriers for all 51 jurisdictions. The horizontal axis measures required school hours, while the vertical axis tracks initial examination and licensing fees. The distribution is highly skewed. Nationwide, the median requirement for a barber license is 1,250 hours of formal education. Some states impose much higher hurdles. Iowa possesses the highest educational barrier at 2,100 hours. Kentucky historically maintained a 1,500-hour requirement while charging $500 in fees. Conversely, New York requires only 291 school hours and a $75 fee. These hourly requirements translate directly into lost earning potential. Depending on the state, a student may spend anywhere from 68 to 896 calendar days in unpaid training before they are legally allowed to work. Human biology and the risks of a straight razor shave do not change across state lines. This variant suggests that licensing hours are determined by political geography rather than a uniform clinical standard. Industry incumbents often argue that high educational hours are the primary defense against infectious diseases and bloodborne pathogens in the barbershop. The Institute for Justice tested this hypothesis by analyzing 3,218 health inspections of barbershops along the border of Alabama and Mississippi. Alabama mandates 1,000 hours of school, while Mississippi strictly requires 1,500 hours with no alternative apprenticeship pathway. If training hours ensured safety, Mississippi shops should be significantly cleaner. However, barber shops in both states passed their inspections at a sane high rate, exceeding 95%. There was no statistically significant difference in sanitation quality between the two regimes. This data aligns with a study of barber curricula, which found that only 26% of mandatory training hours are actually dedicated to public health and sanitation. Most instruction focuses on styling techniques and business management. Mandatory school hour inflation appears to be an inefficient tool for public safety. High-hour requirements impose heavy costs on students without offering a quantifiable improvement in shop sanitation. Since 1990, the cost of vocational education has outpaced general inflation. By 2026, technical and business school tuition rose by over 180%, with many proprietary programs now charging between $15,000 and $20,000. The financial barrier also includes opportunity cost. A student in a 1,500-hour program loses approximately $22,500 in foregone wages they could have earned in an unlicensed field during their training. Because most students use loans to cover these costs, the U.S. Department of Education now scrutinizes these programs under its gainful employment framework. To maintain federal funding, programs must prove their graduates can afford their debt. Annual loan payments are generally capped at 8% of total earnings, or 20% of discretionary income. With student debt averaging over $7,300 and median starting salaries near $35,000, many barbering programs are currently at risk of failing these federal standards. Regulatory layering has changed personal care education from an accessible trade into a high-debt pathway that struggles to meet federal financial requirements. Policymakers sometimes claim that fewer than 40% of licensed barbers actively practice their trade. However, current administrative data is insufficient to support that conclusion. The profession is dominated by the booth rental model. In this structure, barbers act as independent business owners, leasing a chair and managing their own finances as sole proprietors. This model causes problems for federal tracking. The Bureau of Labor Statistics relies on payroll records from established businesses, which omits the self-employed booth renters who make up most of the industry. These independent barbers often report lower adjusted gross income due to allowable business deductions for chair rent and supplies. When combined with underreported tipped income, their actual earnings are frequently higher than what appears in tax databases. Meanwhile, state licensing boards merely track who paid their renewal fees. They do not collect data on a practitioner's real income or the number of hours they spend behind the chair. Relying on these incomplete datasets creates a distorted view of the industry. Without better tracking of the self-employed workforce, federal penalties may be based on a misunderstanding of the trade's actual economic activity. Many sectors currently face uncertainty due to advancements in software and generative artificial intelligence, which are expected to displace various corporate and administrative roles. Robotic haircutting remains impractical. Human heads display massive anatomical variability, and hair possesses complex physical dynamics, texture, cowlicks, and density that are difficult to automate. Current visual mapping systems struggle with these dynamic hair physics. A precise haircut or a straight razor shave requires tactile sensitivity and real-time adjustments to avoid skin lacerations, capabilities that are currently unique to human practitioners. Barbershops also function as community hubs, offering a sensory wellness experience and personalized consultations that are not easily replicated by digital systems. The profession is shielded from software-driven displacement, yet it faces a man-made shortage. The workforce is constrained by a layer of administrative complexity that has outpaced the actual risks of the trade. The findings from Alabama, Mississippi, and Kentucky suggest a specific set of legislative changes. The first is a statutory reduction of mandatory school clock hours to lower tuition and opportunity costs. Kentucky provided a recent example of this shift. In 2026, House Bill 273 reduced mandatory training hours from 1,500 to 1,200 and removed subjective character clauses that acted as barriers to entry. A second solution is the expansion of paid on-the-job apprenticeship pathways. These programs allow students to learn inside a commercial shop, enabling them to earn a living while they train. State boards can also move away from individual educational gatekeeping. By focusing on direct point-of-service sanitation inspections of facilities, health departments can ensure safety without imposing massive debt on individual practitioners. Legislatures can secure public safety by prioritizing clinical evidence and direct facility inspections over the current system of high-debt educational mandates. Aligning regulatory frameworks with actual sanitary outcomes ensures the trade remains accessible and sustainable.